Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI InterConnect Podcast, where we talk with two leaders transforming their industry through innovation, data, and AI. Your host, Laurent, and today's guest is Jason Dearborn, CEO, co-founder and CEO of GRNX Global, a company reimagining the global grain trade through instant payment, blockchain traceability, and carbon integration. Jason has a fascinating background. He's a former politician turned tech founder, bridging traditional agriculture with decentralized finance. We will dive into his journey, GRNX mission, and how they are connecting farmers, buyers, and carbon market through technology. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laurent. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation and opportunity.
That's great. I was very happy to have you, and let's start, Jason, with your journey. You have moved from politics to agriculture to blockchain. What led you to found GRNX Global?
Thank you for that question. I have been born, locally. I live on a Canadian farm. The Brecknock Farm was founded in 1906, and my great-great-grandmother was the first non-Indigenous woman ever here. And this is my great-grandfather's home where I still reside to this day. So my family have been in agriculture in Canada. They came up north. We were on the losing side of the American Revolution, United Empire Loyalists into Ontario, and then out west at the beginning of the last century. To that end, so I grew up farming. I ran a very large operational farm, and my grandfather and his two sons had one of the largest operating dryland grain farms in Canada in the late 1970s, early 80s. And so it was a natural, it's an industry that I understand. And the other co-founder of Dominion Blockchain Solutions, which is core to the GRNX Global Group, was also an outstanding young farmer of the year in Saskatchewan here. He had the largest private hog operation. So for your listeners that may not know, Saskatchewan is kind of in the middle of Canada. We're north of Montana and North Dakota. We have 40 million acres of dryland grain farming in our province. So it's on a scale absolutely enormous. And I became involved with the blockchain, specifically leaving politics. I went and I took a job for the largest grain handling manufacturer in the world, Brant Industry, based in Regina. And I was their international territory manager. So I was on farms all over the world in 5 continents. And this was in 2011. And part of my job at that point was to arrange the clearance processes. And I was on a flight from Heathrow to Johannesburg. I've been an avid reader of The Economist for many, many years. And there was a little box thing about Bitcoin. And I have a background not only in business, but in systematic theology from the University of Toronto, where I did my first 2 degrees. And I kind of understood it instantly. And I was very, very intrigued because as we were shipping 2 containers a week overseas to markets in Kazakhstan, South Africa, Australia, everywhere, the payment systems were my responsibility. In part, I had a lot of help, but you had to take FX positions, etc. And I thought this would be amazing if we could just do the clearance in 10 minutes, like Bitcoin's starting to talk about. And so I really started to dig into it in 2012, and my family and I discussed it that Christmas. And we started to buy at $86 many years ago, Bitcoin. And in 2013, December 17th, we incorporated the company, Dominion Bitcoin Mining Company. And the co-founder is an engineer and farmer, as I said. So we were looking at building out, the technical infrastructure on how blockchains work, which began with mining. And it became readily apparent that the issue was with the industry was not going to be the technology, it was going to be the regulation. And I had a very unique background being I was a member of the Legislative Assembly for Kindersley in the Saskatchewan legislature in the 24th and 25th legislatures, and I was the information technology critic for the province. And the minister of that actually sat on my board he was on the other side, but we're good friends, and he sat on my board originally, and this is where it kind of started. And now, I guess in 20 14, I was in front of the Senate Committee on Banking and Finance in the Parliament of Canada begging for regulation to come about to use the blockchain integrated into the economy. It's 2025. And we're just getting first recognition in the first federal budget. There's a Stand with Crypto Canada and some other groups are moving on this. It's just taken an enormously long time, and we're not there yet. I hope that's a bit of an.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, definitely. It's wonderful. Then you went. I mean, you jump from one thing to another, and as you say, things move slowly. And you mentioned that GRNX has 150 farmers, investors covering over 1 million acres. I mean, you were talking about 44 million acres before, and 1 million acres is a huge piece. That's impressive. What problem were they faces when GRNX set out to solve?
I guess I should say what happened first, we pivoted towards agriculture completely in 2019. And our compliance officer was sitting, very clever woman, she was sitting on the Canadian regulatory agency run by the banking industry. And it became very, very clear to us that we were going to be excluded in Western Canada from having any kind of say. We don't have capital markets here. We have giant farms, oil and potash and uranium and but we're a resource-based economy in the West. And there was a strike which occurred for the railways, and the price of shipping went way up. And we built our first application to interface with the farmers called Go Grain. The issue of farming fits very, very well with distributive finance because it's dispersed globally. And the problem that we're solving, to your point here, is that, the farmer doesn't know their customer. They're selling to a middleman who is now engaging in international trade clearance with another middleman. And the buyer has to deal with the middleman in another country. Often that position is through a governmental agency, or governments are involved because you have, huge capital risks. A boat of grain is many, many tens of millions of dollars. So a single farmer has been unable to ever mitigate this risk. Most of the reason I think the farmers invested with us is it's more a level of trust. I have amongst our boards of directors, the GRNX Global group has actually kind of 5 companies coming together, and it includes the largest grain brokerage, a mobile app company that is doing kind of Uber for farmers for driving their trucking. There's another company that one's called Go Grain. There's another company called VeryGrain, which is doing digital sampling. There's another company that's just software, Vision Pool. And we also have strategic alliances and partnerships with the GRNX token, which we expect to be launched by the end of the year here. And this decentralized autonomous organization will be governed by the farmers. And farmers invested with us because we have a former Canadian Minister of Agriculture, the Honourable Jerry Ritz, sits on our board of directors, and we have a former Premier, Grant Devine, who was also Minister of Agriculture provincially, sits on another VeryGrain board. It's not like we're going anywhere. My family's been here for 120 years. We know our neighbors. We're a capital-intensive industry, and we went out and raised capital to get started with the first apps, and they're all getting integrated into a single platform. So the big problem that you're going to solve is that you can facilitate international grain trade contracts and have instant clearance for the farmer. So their risk is diminished that the Indian buyer is going to pay, or that the Japanese buyer is going to pay, or whoever it might be. We're the 3rd largest caloric exporter in the world from Canada. We're our country only has 40 million people. We're huge, but after Brazil and the United States, we're just so large. We're the world's leading exporter in a whole ton of commodities. I think there's about 9 that we're dominant in. In my particular area where I live, our primary crops would be durum wheat, which is what you make pasta out of. We provide 60% of the world's export market. And then in crop rotations, you tend to grow a cereal followed by a pulse. We grow in our area red lentils and other types of lentils, French lentils, green lentils. But red lentils, we provide 90% of the world's export lentils. And Canada's invented and the largest supplier of canola in the world as well, gross and export. So, but again, the farmers are not interfacing with the end users or the buyers. So our first customers are, we're really looking at the domestic market and providing these clearances to the farmers. And we figured that part out, and we've done the first tests, and we're just now doing the international shipments and clearance, which is a little more complex. You're dealing with foreign currency, but this is where it's coming. And we're partnered with the Japanese. We have a vice president in Japan, Susumu Najima, and they're excellent first-run partners. Japan, we are their preferred vendor. As Canadians, we have very high-quality food, and it's caused by the -40 that occurs every year. And what this does in all of our grainland farming, it kills all the pathogens in our stored grain. So, I've been to France a number of times and Europe. Your milder climate, there's chemicals that have to be used often for storage of your grains and this sort of thing. We're a very low carbon emitter for production as well. We have very, very little chemical use relative to vegetable production. As an example, you're putting gallons per acre on to get clean broccoli or whatever. We're using ounces an acre in a pre-seed stage in the production of the cereal grains. So the problem, but that's only the first part of the problem that will be solved, Laurent. Going forward, it is about data sovereignty. The commercialization of farmer data is going to be the most important element. The food traceability, the carbon sequestration, being able to show the consumer exactly what they're getting, bespoke products, right? And that is all going to be housed in the data. So designing the system where the farmers are going to ultimately have control on how they vote for the usage of their data, this is a very, very important piece and central to the mission of the company, because I've been on farms in 5 continents. We can easily feed the world now. There's no problem. From a technological, I would go as far as to say they have a lot of other issues, but the Russians could feed the world by themselves. Only a Canadian can understand how big Russia is, right? And I've been through there in the farms. It's just so vast. The technological capacity to feed the world is not the problem. It is a logistics, storage and political problem. And what I know from visiting farmers in France and South Africa and Kazakhstan, they're never going to vote to starve someone, ever. So this is a big part of moving the grain trade on chain, is about feeding the world. And people trust farmers. You can't move your farm. It's a wonderful industry to work in. You can't move your farm, so you must be honest. All your neighbors know you. They know your business. This is the same in Scotland as it is in New Zealand, as it is, it doesn't matter where, right? So it's a very, very honest industry, and at the basis of it, it's about work and profit and family, but you're feeding people. That's it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it.
Okay. Yeah, so just the maintenance of the medium is going to be so important going forward. Marshall McLuhan, the great Canadian philosopher, the medium is the message. So who controls the blockchain for the transaction of calories is going to be a really important issue going forward. And I would prefer that it's going to be, there'll be more than one, but I would like the GRNX token, and we're working with that foundation, that they're going to be structuring this on the farmers being in control of that. French farmers, Spanish farmers, just farmers everywhere in the world. And so I think it's a good feeling. And if you do the right thing, that's good for business.
Definitely. I love this. This is very interesting. So GRNX is essentially building financial and logistical trust in a very old industry. What's your definition of success for GRNX in the next 2 years?
We'd like to see this rapidly established, which we've been working on this for a number of years. And we've got a partnership with the largest cryptocurrency group in Japan, and we're working with them right now. And we think that this is a really great way to move forward. We were attracted to work with this particular group because they had the same approach to regulation as we do, which is follow the regulation, build the regulations out. There's a wonderful, I just saw a podcast this morning where, South Park's finally taken a shot at the cryptocurrency world and everything else, and they're spot on. We're not doing that. The GRNX token, as we start to employ it, we're not the owners of it. It's just a tool that we're going to be using, but it's all going to be backed with real world assets. So, I've been in politics and I've been in cryptocurrency, and, they're both pretty greasy spaces, if you really want to be honest, right? Fast money. And yet the idea behind a distributive ledger and the cryptology and everything else, it's sound. I think we're going to see more and more of the economies move into these spaces. I'm embarrassed that I missed the second Trump bump, like how well it's accelerated after the second presidency. And so with the large institutional investment coming into the space, it's never going to go back. We were in Bitcoin before it hit $1 billion total market cap, right? And so we thought, oh, this is the big time. And still, there was no liquidity, there was no exchanges. We've been around the space for a long, long time. So our focus is on putting real world assets on chain and having that transparency, and having that clearance. It's going to be faster, better, cheaper. You're going to have an elimination of the FX positions, which, this is particular, Japan's a really, really great first market for us because all of our trades into Japan have historically been through the US dollar. So we're selling Canadian product through US dollar. The Japanese are paying with yen through the US dollar. It doesn't instantaneously get there. You can have 6 months between the signing of a contract and the delivery of the product. Well, in 6 months' time, you can have a great deal of fluctuation in the currency position. So you're having to take positions to ensure that you're getting paid the Canadian dollars that you thought you were getting. This is one of the upsides. But on top of that, you'll also be able to see absolutely everything on chain. This is a great part of how it's overtly transparent. You'll be able to see the farmer. You'll be able to see, now some of this will be redacted for market purposes in the short term, but over time, you're going to be able to see the stored grain, the field that it was produced from, what day it went in the truck, where it went to the train, which train it went to the boat. All of these pieces will be able to be there. It's going to be a massive disruptor to the insurance industry because you're going to have perfect actuarial data, and there's already derivative blockchain products for this. So that's a huge saving. You've got a savings in the FX. At the end of the day, you're going to end up that the customer is going to get a much better price and the producer is going to get a better price. And even beyond that, our farmer investors, these are exceedingly sophisticated business people. Most of them are running $10 million operations, some of them much larger than that. I'd say the largest are into the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not old MacDonald had a farm with a pitchfork and a straw hat. We've been using GPS to drive the tractors for the last 25 years. It's a very important time that the data sovereignty comes online now. John Deere and Case have both launched their autonomous tractors now. So it's culturally very important for us to be retaining that data sovereignty, to have farms owned. It doesn't matter if they're corporate, but with families at their core, because again, it's a values thing. Farmers will always share with you. And I'm not, the alternative is massive global tech corporations owning land. Like, it's not really a coincidence the largest landowner in the United States is Mr. Gates. And he's just reversed his position on climate change, I guess, in the last week or whatnot. So when you have shareholder value is the most important element, and it is for our company as well, but there's also, it has to be aligned with the values of, I can be very, very wealthy or not be very wealthy. If I don't have communities and family and freedom, what's it worth?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, I think you mentioned it already, but let's go technical for a moment. How does GRNX platform actually work?
So we begin with, we've incorporated groups that have already built a lot of the technology. So the way that our company makes money is we take a fee for lending, and we're underwriting the grain contracts through the crypto world through a lending platform. So the way that this works, through Johnston's Grain, which is the largest brokerage in Western Canada, they have 10,000 farmers that are receiving their emails every day, and they are matching farmers that have a product, let's say lentils for sale, with a buyer. Now, we only work with licensed Canadian Grain Commission buyers, and this is quite important because to have a license to be able to buy grain from a farmer, those licensed companies must post a bond that guarantees that the producer will be paid that contract within 90 days. And what we do then is we take that contract and we put it into a smart contract and put it through a lending platform. And that lending platform then accesses from the crypto world, but we're really utilizing stable coins for this process, right? So that you're getting away from the FX. And our partners in Japan have actually, they've got a technology that does instantaneous FX, so they can be paid in Japanese yen and can flip to Canadian. And so the contract is put into a smart contract through the GRNX token. And this is in a lending platform. And let's say it's for $100. The $100 is coming from the Japanese. It's there. And then through the other applications, let's say in 1 month's time is the delivery date. You've got the very grain is matching the sample to what the contract wants. So you're taking the right thing. You're not taking wheat. You're taking lentils, and it has this protein and this color and this moisture, etc. And those things are lined up. And then the Go Grain delivery app is used with the truck, and it goes from the farmer's, grain storage facility or the grain bags. One of our divisions, Grain Bag Mapper, there's temporary storage is put in giant. They look like giant white sausages, and we track these, collect them, and recycle them. It's a small division, but a profitable one, and run by a real go-getter who's the president of that company. Anyway, so it traces all the way to the grain terminal, and when the grain terminal receives the grain, this triggers the payment. And our partners with the Canadian Stablecoin Group in Toronto, they transfer the money directly into the farmer's bank account. Okay, and that receivable now becomes ours. And the grain company is now paying a delta, which is cheaper than they can get through traditional finance. And they pay us the principal and the delta, and it goes backwards through the lending platform. And the payment is made back to the lenders, and wash, rinse, repeat. And so all of this is able to be digitized, automated, and is globally scalable. So starting in Canada is a really great place because you've got the underwritten legal positions that if a grain company hasn't made their payment on day 89, we automatically go to the Grain Commission on the farmer's behalf and we get the principal back, right? So it's a very, very safe investment for the lender. Anybody that's involved with yield farming is completely familiar with rug pulls and, all of this kind of situation, which South Park just, illustrated brilliantly last week. This is the opposite to that. This doesn't negate the real $100 worth of lentils that are going to France, right? It's there, it's, and it's enforceable by law. So I hope that explains the platform. So there's really two parts to it. There's the GRNX protocol, which is the token which is housing all the blockchain pieces. And then there's the GRNX grain intelligence group of applications that interface with the farmer. So that data, the farmer data, we are the medium for it to go into the GRNX protocol. And the GRNX protocol is the housing mechanism for the smart contracts to be able to access the lending platforms. This is the tokenomics would suggest that, the purchase of the GRNX token is probably the really, really great investment because the more volume you run through it, the more value the token has. And it's designed on fixed supply. And, there's airdrops set aside specifically for farmers to get them on board, to get them using it. And we'll stage those out over time as well, because we know that as soon as they get something for free, they're going to cash it out. And just like any Bitcoin that I sold from 10 years ago, it's great regret, right? So we'll offset that. We've learned over time, and then we'll go into the other markets of, the big exporting countries are what we're looking at. Canada, Australia, Argentina, and these are aligned with, and then the United States, Brazil. But they're different types of crops, and it's a valuable piece strategically for us to become the dominant medium of exchange. And If you can get to that point, your market share capture will aid the farmer in they've got ownership of some of the tokens. They're going to be able to buy more. They're going to be able, once they have tokens and it starts appreciating because there's volumes running through it, they're going to be able to stake those to use them for other, whatever they want, personal or business. But I would expect that these will be closed loops that'll come back onto the business. They'll have their own GRNX tokens, which they'll stake to buy a new tractor or to buy seed or whatever it's going to be. So we're not really inventing anything. We just happen to have the knowledge of the agricultural sector, and we're linking that to the technology sector that already exists. And we're integrating all of this with artificial intelligence right now. We've got one active AI agent. It's pretty cool. It's an order taker for the environmental grain bag division. You can talk to it. And hilariously, as we're showing this to our farmer buddies, it was a female voice. Her name's Thelma. And, you can order your grain bags and you tell them all this. It took about 4 phone calls till one of the farmers tried to ask her out. So we are using, and we see that the AI is going to come up with pattern recognition in the front running of markets in the data. So we're working with technical traders. Probably this is the biggest piece, is that if I know 27% of this stored canola in Canada and Australia, I can tell you the price of pork in Chicago. It's all calories and they're correlated. And I don't know if so many of your audience will be tech people, but this is kind of how it works, right? If there's a shortage of canola, then it's going to push the price of canola up, which means it's going to be replaced with something. That could also mean that the price of soy is going to be pushed up, and the price of soy being pushed up will be correlated to the price of corn, and that goes up a little bit. And if the price of corn goes up, and you've got 100 hogs to feed, and you're feeding it corn, you've got to get rid of some of those hogs because you can't afford to feed all 100 of them. So you sell 5 of them. And the data around this from the Chicago Mercantile Board of Exchange is absolutely solid. And so as you start to have control of the stored grain data, you're front running a whole potential large amounts of markets. And that's probably this data being controlled by the farmer going into the token is going to be a big, big part of the token's appreciation. And as you start to couple that with artificial intelligence, looking at trading strategies, looking at selling pools for the producers. So it's never been possible. Even the largest farmers, I know, 2 of the largest farmers in Canada right now are operating. One's operating 250,000. It's a family group. From south of me, one of my neighbors just to the north of here, he operates 140,000 acres. Like, these are enormous by any global standard. That's probably 140,000 tons of production a year. But even at that, they don't have the risk management to be able to coordinate a train, coordinate a Panamax vessel, underwrite the finance. This will do all of that, but in cooperation with the other farmers. So now, they're going to be able to fill their own boats, and every one of those profit points will be something that the customer and the producer should be able to capture, and we're in the middle, and we'll take a little bit, and what we take is transparent. So we're not set to gouge, right? We're set to grow. It's a great idea to have a little bit of something enormous rather than a big chunk of nothing. So that's it.
Yeah, I love the market. Never work on the commodity grain, but I work on the market in Chicago on other derivatives, and it's very complex. And I hear what you say very carefully. I love it. You mentioned on our previous conversation key difference. Your PI firm in Dubai,
Yes.
helping amplify the GRNX message globally.
Yes.
How are partnerships like that shaping your expansion?
Well, thank you. We currently would have more than 14 partnerships. And that is a wonderful thing about the blockchain industry. It's moving so quickly, and there are a lot of pieces to this. So we have, the 4 or 5 agricultural pieces in Canada. That's our expertise. That's really dominated by Johnston's. They're the largest of the groups, and they're a 40-year family business that has the trust of the farming community. But on the other side of the coin, because we're in the real world asset blockchain space, we were able to find partners that wanted to work with us. They like our story. And Key Difference is one of these groups out of Dubai. When they did another group is the RYO group out of Japan. This is the largest cryptocurrency. And I would hope that I'll put you in touch with Chairman Diaz and that he could be a guest on your podcast. They're really fascinating, visionary people and their process of compliance is perfect for what we want. We want to have a gold standard so that farmers will trust us and customers will trust us. So the Key Difference, when they did the announcement, the global announcement of our partnership with RYO, the number of impressions were beyond what we could believe. We don't even know if they're real. It was supposedly about 120 million impressions from this release, which there's 130 million people or something like that in Japan. It went to the Japanese audience. We don't know how many were bots or whatever else, but it was massively, successful. And from that, we've been able to garner some attention and meetings and the development from this. On the cryptocurrency side, the GRNX Foundation, we're working with 6 different groups there. There's a custody group, there's a compliance group, there's the foundation group. There's the token generation event group, right? I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces to have all of these things come together, and we're starting to see a solidification in the crypto world with giant players like Coinbase. We're very, very fortunate to we've been in the space long enough. I know the CEO of Coinbase Canada, some of the other exchanges here, and the industry's coming. The only way to do this, you can't do it by yourself. You have to do it with trust and collaboration with others. And so because we've been around for so long, we're very, very fortunate, I feel, in Canada to be one phone call away from basically anybody in the space. And anybody that's been in the crypto world will have, I've met Craig Wright at Kelvin Ayers' birthday party, Andreas Anagopoulos, or however you pronounce his name, like some of the really early crypto guys. I wouldn't say we have relationships, but we've been there with them a long time ago, and we have people, the glorious Emma Todd from Canada. You should absolutely have her on your show. I'm more than happy to do that introduction. She's the queen of Canada. She knows everybody. And, just having these groups, this is how this industry functions.
I love it. With pleasure. With all your invitation to introduce me, definitely. This is how business work, a relationship. And looking forward, where do you see the grain industry heading in the next decade?
That's a fairly loaded question, Laurent. I'll tell you.
Make it short.
The data sovereignty is so important to us right now. In 1942, in February, following the bombing of Pearl Harbor in Canada, the government of Canada nationalized the grain export industry only for Western Canada. Okay? And it took 60 seconds to get that removed. And as that got removed, and it was removed by the Harper government, and Minister Jerry Ritz was the one who removed it, the price of our land has gone up 800 times in value when you have marketing freedom. I believe that we are in this very serious position of global conflict right now. Ukraine, Russia, Iran, US, Israel, and I don't think that there's any backing away from Taiwan. So you've seen globally the commitment from the NATO countries to hit 5% of GDP for defense spending. Canada's in a very precarious position. Our country's broke. We've had 10 years of gross incompetence in government with, the largest deficits ever. And if the wars move from being proxy to becoming fully kinetic, Canada will be expected to carry their fair share. But the problem is our armed forces have been completely gutted and depleted. We have a whining, fat woman who was crying on national television last week, apologizing about A, B, or C. She's the head of our armed forces now. It is ludicrous. Like, I don't trust you to kill people. That's what you have to do if you're in a war. So what's going to happen? What do you need when you operate in a theater of war? Well, you need soldiers, you need equipment, right? You need energy. and you need food. And Canada is going to be called upon to provide 2 out of 4 of those things, but you can get energy from a lot of places. You can't get food from a lot of places. So I think that the government of Canada is very likely going to, through tariffs and other mechanisms, be coming after the ownership structures of our farms. So, and the way that they'll do this is through the data. If they control the medium of exchange, they essentially control the trade. And so when you're asking, and I don't think that this is simply a Canadian problem. I expect the Australians, the Argentinians, and we can't even get started because Europe to us is just crazy. You're seeing what's happening with farmers in Britain, with farmers in the Netherlands, with farmers in Germany, right? In the Netherlands, they've had a bunch of their farms confiscated. In Germany, the same thing. And those are for, very bureaucratic, Brussels-driven decisions about emissions or whatever nonsense they want to talk about there. I'm going to tell you, Laurent, the reason our farm was so successful is my great-grandfather and his brother, my great-great-uncle Sam, they were able to dig a well by hand 42 feet down. And we're 10 miles north of the South Saskatchewan River. If you go a mile south here, you can't hit water because the underground streams take it all the way to the river. Okay, so this is the last place that water pools. And the water's delicious, and we don't filter it. We've never filtered it. My sons were baptized with this water. And the reality is, farmers who live on the land care about the land. I don't want to pollute the land with chemicals. I had all my grandparents from my dad's father, they all died of cancer, like 100% of them. Not 1 or 2. And my grandfather died with a tumor the size of a football in his stomach. He was a spray plane operator. So they were spraying, and they fly through their own chemicals, sucked right into their bodies, and they smoked. And, this is a different time, 1950s, 1960s. And the chemicals were very, very strong. So when you talk about environmentalism, the environmentalism is best. It's not best exercised by academics, sitting in a parlor. It's best by people that are out on the land. Like, I love the wildlife. All the farmers love the wildlife, right? Lots of them are hunters, fishermen, things like this, your real Canadian kind of view. And so we want to keep the land clean, but I really think the grain trade, how much the international foreign governments are going to inject themselves into it for national security reasons is the preeminent issue over the next 10 years.
Very well answered. Bravo. Okay. Yes, if you had to summarize GRNX contribution in one sentence, what would it be?
It's putting the global
what make it unique?
Yeah, it's putting the grain trade on chain. That's it. That's what we're doing. GRNX is putting the grain trade on chain. And we're doing this by preserving data sovereignty of the farmer. So it's 2 sentences, but I hope that that's clear enough in what I've explained.
It is. And no, everything was very, very clear. We need to do that in a year from now again and see the evolution of your project. And Jason has been a very, very insightful conversation. And I appreciate you and your team bridging traditional agriculture with digital finance and AI. That's remarkable. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for your time in this opportunity. And hope your viewers enjoyed it, and we'll be following you as we go forward into the future. Thank you.
Definitely. And how can they find you, read about you or your company?
You go to the website at grnx.global, www.grnx.global. And I expect the GrainX site is also up from their foundation. They were just being their foundation was just being struck. So that may be a week or so away. And I'd have them watch for the GrainX token launch. I think the SAFT has already begun. So we can put people in touch with those appropriate groups. And that was one of the things, it's already had its first 7-figure investment from a Japanese group. So it's coming. And I really do believe that in the space of crypto, real world assets coupled with artificial intelligence are going to be a very, very hot play over the next 18 months.
I remember that. Wonderful. Jason, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of AI InterConnect. And if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who is building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.